Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Fast Fact series. I am Ted, your host, and for this Fast Fact, we're going to look at the career of Darius the Great, Darius or Darius the Great. And he was a one of the great kings of Persia, the third great king of Persia, and he comes onto the scene on the heels of the death of Cambyses the First. And Cambyses the First, he dies on campaign in Egypt, and with the death of Cambyses, the entire nascent Achaemenid Persian Empire goes into revolt. There are great rebellions throughout the various parts of the Persian Empire. The Egyptians rise up in rebellion and they shake off Persian domination. The dynasty, the ruling house, the Achaemenid family, and again, Achaemenid is in the name of their dynasty. It isn't the actual name of the dynasty. It's what we remember them as. And the name Achaemenid is Greek. It's based on this Greek tracing of the lineage of these kings back to a common ancestor named Achaemenes. So it's not a Persian name or an Iranian name for this dynasty. It's simply the name that the Greeks gave them, and it's the name that descends to us. But that dynasty, they began to fight amongst themselves to see who will have the right to rule. And the royal figure to emerge from this dynastic dispute was Darius the First. Now, Darius was a great administrator. He's remembered as the great administrator of the Persian Empire. Darius was from a cadet line of the royal dynasty. He was not a son of Cambyses. He was not a son or a grandson of Cyrus the Great, the founder. And Darius had actually married one of Cyrus's daughter, a woman named Atassa. She became his key, I guess, to ruling. Now, Darius reorganized the Persian Empire, utilizing all of the great resources and innovations that that came into being during the course of Near Eastern civilization. All of the great innovations and resources since the founding of the first cities in Sumer. He utilized them all. He put them all to good use. One of Darius's great innovations was the creation of 30 satrapies or provinces throughout his empire. Each province was under a satrap. Each satrapy was under a satrap. And the satrap was either a high-ranking Persian or Mede or a dynast from the ruling family. From the ruling family, from the Achaemenid family, or a member of the formerly ruling dynasty of that province. And the satraps were responsible for the administration of their satrapy, and they were answerable to the great king alone. Now, the satraps were also visited by royal inspectors who came from Persepolis at the king's direction to supervise and to make sure that the satrapies were run in order and that the tax revenue were making their way to the great king's capitals. Now, Darius also had the genius to separate the administration of the satrapy from its economic and military aspects. He appointed a fiscal officer to oversee the finances of the satrapies, and he also appointed a military officer to lead the armed forces of the satrapies. And each satrapy had their own administrative officer, their own fiscal officer, and their own military officer. They were all separate offices, and they were all individually accountable to the great king. Now, a long tradition of dividing offices proved well. It proved a prudent strategy in the long run for the great king, and they were most beneficial. They were most successful for the great king when the offices were rotated amongst the great families of the Persian Empire. Now, the true genius of the Persians was that they managed to win over the various ethnic groups of the ancient Near East. And this, of course, stands in contrast with the exception of the Egyptians. They allowed the Hebrew priesthood to return to Judea. They supported the Lydian aristocracy in Western Asia Minor. And of course, they became friendly and favorable to the Babylonian elites in Mesopotamia. And this explains the remarkable stability and tranquility of a Persian rule. And again, Egypt is the exception. The Egyptians proved to be the great thorn in the sides of the Persian kings. The Egyptians would not brook the Persian great kings attempting to play the role of pharaoh or attempting to in any way rule over Egypt. It was simply incompatible to Egyptian thought that the Persians would rule in Egypt. Now, the Persian kings, they also greatly improved royal communications and trade across the Near East. One of the great features of Persian rule was the creation of the Great Royal Roads. And this was simply building on the accomplishments of the Assyrians. The Assyrians built royal roads, and the Assyrians did all they could to facilitate the economic vitality of the Near East. What the Persians did was they simply continued that practice. They endowed temples, they sponsored art, they promoted trade, and they recruited and they seduced the local elites and brought them in to serve their government. By 500 BCE, the Persian Empire was the most strongest and the most civilized structure that had yet emerged in the ancient Near East. It was a true testament to the last 30 centuries of human development that the Persian Empire was able to lay claim to these artifacts, that they were able to stand on those legs. Darius' great accomplishments, however, will be tested in less than a year, when a group of people on the fringes of his empire in Asia Minor, the Hellenes, or better yet, or as they're better yet known, the Greeks, they rose in rebellion against this rule. And this rebellion drew the Persians out of Asia Minor. Well, first it drew the Persians into Asia Minor to put down the rebellion, and then it drew them out of Asia Minor across the Aegean to confront the Greeks, the Hellenes, in their homeland. And this was because they found out that the Greeks in Greece, sorry about that, were aiding and abetting the Greek rebels in Asia Minor. Now, this invasion was overseen by King Xerxes, and Xerxes launched its invasion in 479 BCE, and this invasion would see Athens burned and the Persians defeated, actually, in two major battles on the same day. The failure of Xerxes' invasion had a number of consequences. One, Persian ambition were really checked as far as future expansion was concerned. The Persian Empire does not expand any further. They simply devote themselves to maintaining stable rule in the great empire created by Cyrus and Cambyses. Two, the Greeks developed a unique identity based on this the collective trauma of being invaded by the Persians. And three, because the Persian Empire, because the great king had been defeated by, and really compared to everybody else, the Greeks, the Hellenes at this point, they were barbarians on the far side of the world. They did not share in the great tradition of Sumer and Akkad. They did not share in any of the great traditions of being descended from the lineage of Narmer. They did not share in this great common shared history of cooperation and trading, and sharing the same cultural and social institutions as all of the other states of the ancient Near East and of the Nile River Valley. So they were outsiders. And they were literally barbarians, viewed as barbarians on the far side of the world. The fact that the great king had been defeated by the barbarians on the far side of the world sort of inspired more serious contenders for hegemonship in the Near East to simply rebel against Achaemenid Persian authority. Egypt went into rebellion. Babylon went into rebellion. The Assyrians went into rebellion. Very serious people with long traditions of imperial operations themselves and long traditions of independence themselves began to rise up and began to check and to challenge Persian authority. The empire was rocked by these very serious rebellions. It necessitated Xerxes' immediate return, and because the Greek homeland was not important to them. It necessitated Xerxes to focus all of his efforts, all of his energy into putting down these rebellions, into reestablishing Persian control in those more valuable eastern provinces, eastern satrapies. That will do it for our look into into Darius. Hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this. I know a lot of people are going to be like, wow, the Greeks are barbarians. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But from the cultural perspective of the peoples of the ancient Near East, who are all tracing their development back to Sumer and Akkad, the Greeks, because they're not in that tradition, they are viewed as interlopers, as people on the periphery who are causing trouble for the people at the center. And again, the same will be the same could be viewed of in Egypt, where the Egyptians are tracing themselves back to Narmer's unification and to the Neolithic villages before Narmer's unification. Anybody coming in is going to be viewed as an interloper, as a barbarian, as someone not of their society. And the Greeks themselves, they will hold the same view of the Romans when the Romans entered the Greek mainland. But as always, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about this. And I am Ted, and I'll see you guys next time for another Fast Fact.